Welcome back to Global Genius. Quick question before we start. If the ground underneath your house cracked open right now, how far do you think you'd fall before you hit something solid? 10 feet? 100? Because in several states on this list, cavers have lowered weighted ropes hundreds of feet into the dark and still never touched bottom. There are caves holding 9,000-year-old human remains, fish that live nowhere else on Earth, and rooms nobody has fully explored in over a century of trying. So drop a comment with your guess. How deep do you think the scariest cave on this list actually goes? And if you like exploring the hidden side of this planet with us, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is exactly the kind of thing we dig into every week. Then stick with us because we're going state by state, alphabetically through all 50, and the strangest part usually isn't the depth. It's what's waiting at the bottom. Let's go underground. Alabama, Fern Cave. Jackson County, Alabama sits on top of more than 3,500 charted caves. The deepest Fern Cave drops 536 feet and stretches over 15 miles through limestone. Inside is Surprise Pit, a 437-foot freefall drop, deep enough that you could lower a 40-story building into it and still not reach the top. The cave is also one of the most significant bat hibernation sites in the eastern United States, sheltering endangered gray bats and Indiana bats by the hundreds of thousands. Alaska, El Capitan Cave. On Prince of Wales Island in the Tongass National Forest, more than 600 caves riddle the karst landscape. El Capitan Cave is the longest mapped cave in the state, stretching over 2 miles into 400-million-year-old limestone. Cavers exploring the system have pulled out human remains roughly 9,000 years old, along with the bones of brown bears, wolverines, and other animals that vanished from these islands after the Ice Age. A nearby pit discovered in 1988 is still considered one of the deepest vertical shafts ever found in the U.S. and Arizona. Cave of the Bells, hidden in the Santa Rita Mountains south of Tucson, Cave of the Bells is locked behind a gate. You need to pick up a key and leave a $100 deposit just to get in. Deep inside, roughly 260 feet below the entrance, sits an underground lake with water a suspiciously warm 76 degrees Fahrenheit, believed to be heated by sources far below. Researchers have used the cave's stalagmites to reconstruct thousands of years of southwestern climate history, tracking ancient droughts layer by layer. Arkansas, Fitton Cave. Tucked into the bluffs of the Buffalo National River, Fitton Cave is Arkansas's longest at over 17 miles, with an entrance room the size of a football field. It functions like a biological island. 58 species live inside it, 11 of which exist nowhere else on the planet. In 2020, vandals broke in and stole mineral formations that had taken thousands of years to grow. A theft serious enough to carry a potential decade in federal prison. California, Moaning Caverns. Near the gold country town of Vallecito, Moaning Caverns holds California's deepest single cave chamber, reached by a 16-story spiral staircase built straight down through the opening. Long before that staircase existed, though, something else was already at the bottom. Ancient human remains, among the oldest ever recovered from a cave anywhere in North America. The chamber earned its name from an eerie moaning sound, once produced by dripping water, long since altered by the tourist pathways built through it. Colorado, Spanish Cave, Cueva del Oro. High in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, above 11,000 feet, sits Spanish Cave, one of the highest elevation significant caves in the country, and Colorado's deepest natural pit, plunging over 700 feet. Locals call it Cueva del Oro, the Cave of Gold, after legends of lost Spanish treasure and explorers who supposedly never came back out. The cave hovers near freezing year-round, and its combination of altitude, cold, and technical vertical drops makes it one of the most demanding caves in the Rockies. Connecticut, Twin Lakes Cave. Connecticut has almost no limestone, so true caves are rare. But Twin Lakes Cave in the Marble District near Salisbury is New England's longest. It opened to paying visitors in 1870, making it only the third cave in America ever turned into a tourist attraction, after Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, 1816, and Grand Caverns in Virginia, 1806. Much of it still hasn't been fully surveyed, more than 150 years later. Delaware, Beaver Valley Rock Shelter. For decades, the National Speleological Society listed Delaware as the only state in the country with 0 known caves. That changed in 1958, when a local resident got a small rock shelter near Wilmington, just 56 feet deep. officially added to the National Cave Registry. Archaeological digs later confirmed the Lenape people had used it for shelter and storage long before Europeans arrived. It remains the state's only officially recognized cave. Florida, Wakula Leon Sinks Cave System. Florida's limestone hides the longest known underwater cave system in the country. Divers connected the Wakula Springs and Leon Sink systems into a single network stretching more than 28 miles, with sections plunging around 300 feet below the surface. Deep enough that even experienced cave divers need serious decompression time to come back up. The system has produced fossils of mastodons and other Ice Age megafauna that once wandered what is now dry land above it. Georgia, Ellison's Cave. Ellison's Cave is home to Fantastic Pit, a 586-foot unobstructed vertical drop, the deepest of its kind in the lower 48. Drop a rock and count to 8 before it hits bottom. 3 cavers have died here since 2009, and in 2013, a medic performed a blood transfusion while lying flat inside a low, flooded crawlway, one of the only times that's ever happened inside a cave. The cave still holds more than a dozen miles of surveyed passage. Hawaii, Kazumura Cave. Kazumura Cave on the slopes of Kilauea is the deepest and longest lava tube on Earth, 3,614 feet deep and over 40 miles long, carved by rivers of lava exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. One of its entrances was designated a nuclear fallout shelter in 1966. Today, tours run out of a local guide's backyard. He's been leading trips from his carport since the 1990s. A full end-to-end traverse takes 2 days and requires descending dozens of internal rope drops. Idaho, Minnetonka Cave. Minnetonka Cave, tucked into the Cache National Forest near Bear Lake, is Idaho's largest limestone cave. It has 9 interconnected chambers spread across multiple levels. And to this day, no one has ever found a natural exit besides the entrance. Fossils of ancient marine life are visible embedded in the walls, evidence that this stretch of mountain terrain was once seafloor. Illinois, Illinois Caverns. Illinois Caverns in the state's southwestern karst belt is the largest publicly accessible cave system in the state, with several miles of mapped passage carved through limestone. The cave hosts one of the largest hibernating bat populations in Illinois, and its passages have been gated seasonally to protect them from white nose syndrome, a fungal disease that has devastated bat colonies across the eastern U.S. and Indiana. Binkley's Cave System. Binkley's Cave System, discovered on farmland in southern Indiana, runs an estimated 37 miles, making it one of the longest cave systems in the country. Explorers had to use dye and smoke bombs just to confirm that 2 enormous caves on the property were actually connected by a single narrow shaft. A chamber inside, known for its fossil deposits, has produced remains estimated at 38,000 years old. Iowa, the Coldwater Cave. Coldwater Cave sat completely unknown until 1967, when 2 students scuba dived through a freezing underwater spring and surfaced inside a 17-mile maze lined with 450 million-year-old marine fossils. Because of its extreme stable conditions, researchers have used the cave to test technology intended for eventual missions to Saturn's icy moons, a genuinely alien environment hiding underneath Iowa farmland. Kansas, Schermerhorn Cave. Kansas has very little limestone karst, so true caves are scarce. Schermerhorn Cave inside Schermerhorn Park is one of the few natural limestone caves in the state, accessible by a walkway from the park's nature center, a rare geological anomaly on the Great Plains, where most caves locals point to are actually old hand-dug mine tunnels rather than natural formations. Kentucky, Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is the longest known cave system on Earth, with more than 400 miles of surveyed passage, and researchers believe hundreds more miles remain unexplored. In the 1840s, a doctor built stone cottages inside it, convinced the cave's air could cure tuberculosis. It couldn't. Several patients died there, and the ruins of that failed hospital still stand underground today. Louisiana, Wolf Rock Cave. Louisiana has essentially no limestone karst, and Wolf Rock Cave in the Kisatchie National Forest is the only true cave the state is known to have. Formed roughly 30 million years ago, it's really 2 connected rock overhangs above Bundick Creek. Archaeologists have found stone tools, fish hooks, and spear points, suggesting people sheltered here as far back as 2500 BCE. Nearly 4,500 years of continuous quiet use. Maine, Anemone Cave. Maine has only a handful of true limestone regions, so its most notable caves tend to be small and shaped by the sea or the ice. Anemone Cave, along the rugged coastline of Acadia National Park, is a sea cave carved by relentless Atlantic surf. Its tidal pools crowded with anemones and other intertidal life that only reveal themselves at low tide. A cave that partially disappears and reappears with the ocean itself. Maryland Crystal Grottoes Caverns. Crystal Grottoes near Boonesboro is Maryland's only commercial show cave, discovered by road crews blasting through limestone in the 1920s. It's known for an unusually dense concentration of formations packed into a relatively small space. Nearby, historically, families sheltered in caves during the 1862 Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American military history, using the region's karst as makeshift refuge from the fighting above. Massachusetts Bashbish Gorge, Talus Caves. Massachusetts has little true limestone, but the western Berkshires sit on a marble belt roughly 550 million years old, and vertical cracks in talus caves have been documented there in recent decades. These caves aren't marked with signs. Cavers have reportedly located new openings by watching for steam rising from snow on freezing mornings, evidence of warmer air escaping from voids hidden underneath the drifts. Michigan, Pictured Rocks. Sea caves. Michigan's Upper Peninsula has little limestone karst, but the sandstone cliffs of Pictured Rocks. National Lakeshore on Lake Superior are honeycombed with sea caves, carved slowly by wave action over thousands of years. Kayakers paddle directly into chambers like Chapel Rock and Lover's Leap, where colorful mineral staining bleeds down the cliff face. The same iron, manganese, and copper that also drew ancient copper miners to this region thousands of years before European contact. Minnesota Mystery Cave. Mystery Cave in Forestville State Park is Minnesota's longest at over 13 miles of mapped passage. It sits within one of the few karst regions in a state otherwise shaped by glaciers, and its passages hold underground streams and fossilized marine life dating back hundreds of millions of years, evidence that this part of the Midwest was once covered by a shallow tropical sea. Mississippi Cave Spring. Mississippi has only around 65 known solution caves in the entire state. Cave Spring along the Natchez Trace Parkway is one of the most accessible, though the cavern mouth itself has partially collapsed. It once provided water and shelter to people as far back as 7000 BCE, according to the National Park Service, making it one of the longest continuously used natural sites documented in the state. Missouri Marvel Cave. Marvel Cave, now the underground centerpiece of Silver Dollar City in Branson, was once known as Devil's Den and is considered Missouri's deepest at around 500 feet. Its cathedral room is one of the largest cave entrance chambers in North America, 200 feet tall, 225 feet wide, and over 400 feet long. It's been a tourist attraction since 1894, one of the longest continuously operating show caves in the country. Montana Tears of the Turtle Cave. Tears of the Turtle is the deepest limestone cave in the lower 48, a vertical crack sometimes just 3 feet wide. A 2024 expedition pushed the known depth past 2,400 feet after roughly 50 rope descents, with cavers sleeping on ledges suspended nearly 1,800 feet above the void. The push ended at a sump, a passage completely flooded with water, with an unexplored side passage still waiting beyond it. Nebraska Indian Cave. Nebraska has almost no true limestone caves. What locals call Indian Cave, the centerpiece of Indian Cave State Park, is technically a large sandstone overhang rather than a true cave. But it holds Native American petroglyphs of undetermined age and origin, carved directly into the rock. A mystery that predates written record-keeping in the region entirely. Nevada Lehman Caves. Lehman Caves, now part of Great Basin National Park, is riddled with rare formations called shields, disc-shaped mineral deposits that are uncommon in most caves worldwide, but appear here by the hundreds. The cave was used for private tours and even underground weddings in the early 20th century, before the National Park Service took over management, preserving formations that in some cases took hundreds of thousands of years to form. New Hampshire, Lost River Gorge Caves. New Hampshire's granite bedrock resists the kind of dissolving that creates true limestone caves, so its caves are mostly talus caves, voids formed between massive glacially deposited boulders. At Lost River Gorge in the White Mountains, visitors squeeze through a chain of these granite chambers with names like the Lemon Squeezer and the Judgment Hall of Pluto, some cold enough to hold ice well into summer. New Jersey, Ferry Hole Cave. Ferry Hole Cave sits beside the aptly named Ghost Lake, just off New Jersey's infamous Shades of Death Road. In 1936, an archaeological dig inside the cave turned up roughly 10,000 bone fragments, including a tooth from the extinct giant beaver, alongside Lenape artifacts. The cave itself is only about 30 feet deep, but its setting has made it one of the most talked about haunted sites in the state. New Mexico, Lechuguilla Cave. Lechuguilla Cave, part of Carlsbad Caverns National Park, wasn't recognized as anything special until 1986, when cavers felt a strong breeze coming from a small hole nicknamed Misery. Behind it lay the deepest limestone cave in the United States, sculpted from the bottom up by rising sulfuric acid rather than surface water. Its extreme conditions are considered close enough to Mars that NASA studies the cave and scientists have found bacteria there that are naturally resistant to modern antibiotics. New York, Howe Caverns. Howe Caverns, discovered in 1842, when a farmer noticed his cows gathering near a mysterious cool breeze in a hillside, is now one of the most visited show caves in the country. Visitors take an elevator over 150 feet down and can ride a boat across an underground lake. Nearby, McPhail's Cave carries a darker story. The professor it's named after climbed out of its 110-foot entrance shaft in 1854, fainted from sudden heat, and fell straight back into the void that now bears his name. North Carolina, Linville Caverns. Linville Caverns was discovered by a fisherman who noticed trout apparently swimming directly into solid rock. Inside, generations of total darkness have left the resident rainbow trout completely blind. A pool near the back of the cave has never been fully measured. A 250-foot weighted line lowered into it decades ago never touched bottom, and it remains one of the state's unexplained subterranean mysteries. North Dakota, Killdeer Mountains Rock Shelters. North Dakota has almost no significant limestone deposits near the surface, so it lacks the deep natural caves found in most other states. The closest equivalent are small rock shelters and shallow overhangs in the Killdeer Mountains, where thin carbonate rock caps some buttes. It's one of only a handful of states where true caves essentially don't exist. Ohio Caverns. Ohio caverns were discovered when a farmhand noticed steam rising from a frozen field, tracing it to warm air escaping through a hidden opening. Inside hangs the Crystal King, a stalactite estimated at over 200,000 years old and weighing hundreds of pounds. The cave's vivid mineral coloring left behind by glacial-era water flow has earned it a reputation as one of the most colorful cave systems in the country. Oklahoma, Alabaster Caverns. Alabaster Caverns. State Park protects one of the largest gypsum caves open to the public anywhere in the world. A type of cave far rarer than the limestone caves found in most states. Meanwhile, Robbers Cave State Park earned its name after the Civil War, when the rugged terrain and hidden caves sheltered outlaws hiding from the law, reportedly including Belle Starr and Jesse James. Oregon Caves National Monument. Oregon Caves, nicknamed the Marble Halls of Oregon, is one of the only marble cave systems in the country, formed by water-dissolving marble rather than limestone. The cave has yielded fossils of an extinct Pleistocene-era bear species discovered nowhere else on Earth. Evidence that the cave has been quietly preserving evidence of Ice Age wildlife long after that species vanished from the surface above. Pennsylvania, Laurel Caverns. Laurel Caverns, Pennsylvania's largest cave system, was carved by wind and water erosion through sandstone rather than the more typical limestone dissolution, meaning it lacks classic stalactites, but instead feels like a smooth, alien underground canyon. At its deepest point, visitors are roughly 452 feet underground. The system also serves as the Northeast's largest bat hibernation site, sealed off every winter to protect thousands of endangered bats. Rhode Island, a purgatory chasm, sea caves. Rhode Island has essentially no limestone karst and no significant natural caves in the traditional sense. What the state does have are small sea caves and crevices carved into the clay cliffs of Block Island, near landmarks like the Mohegan Bluffs, where centuries of Atlantic erosion have hollowed out shallow pockets in the rock. A reminder that even a state with almost no caves still has its own quiet underground story. South Carolina, Santee Cave System. The only true karst region in South Carolina lies near Santee State Park, on the edge of Lake Marion, where acidic groundwater has hollowed out an underground river system, visible in places through natural rock chimneys. The caves serve as important habitat for the Rafinesque's big-eared bat. Elsewhere in the state, Table Rock State Park protects smaller natural cave formations tucked into the Blue Ridge foothills. South Dakota, Jewel Cave. Jewel Cave is the third longest cave in the world, with more than 200 miles of mapped passage beneath the Black Hills. And cavers believe the vast majority of the system still hasn't been found. It's named for the sparkling calcite crystals lining its walls. Nearby Wind Cave, discovered in 1881, is famous for barometric winds that rush in and out of its entrance, appearing to make the cave breathe. Tennessee, Craighead Caverns, the Lost Sea. Tennessee has more documented caves than any other state, close to 10,000 of them. The most famous is the Lost Sea inside Craighead Caverns, the largest underground lake in the country. A 13-year-old boy discovered it in 1905 by squeezing through a small tunnel into a 4.5-acre chamber that remains partially unmapped. Ice Age jaguar paw prints, estimated at 20,000 years old, are still visible pressed into the cave floor. Texas, Caverns of Sonora. Formed over roughly 100 million years, the caverns of Sonora are famous among cavers for an exceptionally high density of delicate formations, including crystal helictites that defy gravity by curling in unpredictable directions. A National Speleological Society caver once said of it, "The beauty of Sonora cannot be exaggerated, even by a Texan," a quote frequently repeated by park guides to this day. Utah, Neff's Cave. Neff's Cave, discovered in 1949 by two teenage brothers hiking near Salt Lake City, descends roughly 1,163 feet into the earth along a single vertical fissure in the Wasatch Mountains, one of the deepest caves in the country. It sits directly on the Wasatch Fault, with a river reportedly flowing somewhere beneath it. Access today is tightly restricted to experienced, credentialed cavers because of the extreme technical danger involved. Vermont, Aeolus Cave. Aeolus Cave in the town of Dorset is one of the largest bat hibernation sites in the northeastern United States, historically sheltering hundreds of thousands of bats across multiple species each winter. Since white-nose syndrome swept through the Northeast, bat populations here have collapsed by well over 90%, turning what was once one of the greatest bat gatherings on the continent into a stark case study in how fast an ecosystem can unravel underground. Virginia, Omega Cave System. Beneath Powell Mountain in far southwestern Virginia, the Omega Cave System is the deepest known cave east of the Mississippi River, reaching roughly 1,250 feet below the surface across nearly 30 miles of mapped passage. Its mainstream passage can be walked continuously for about 6 miles, one of the longest traversable underground rivers in the eastern United States. Discovery and mapping have continued for decades and are still ongoing. Washington, Ape Cave. Ape Cave near Mount St. Helens is the longest continuous lava tube in the continental United States, at roughly 2.5 miles. Inside sits the Meatball, a massive volcanic boulder wedged mid-passage for centuries with nothing visibly holding it up. The tube formed around 2,000 years ago during an eruption, and its lower entrance drops explorers into a passage smoothed by ancient lava flow so evenly it can feel almost architectural. West Virginia, Hellhole. Hellhole is part of a 42-mile cave system and shelters nearly half the entire world population of Virginia big-eared bats. The location is so ecologically sensitive that it's now strictly off-limits to the public, guarded to protect roughly 9,000 bats from white-nose syndrome. West Virginia is also home to some of the longest cave systems in the East, including the Friars Hole and Organ Cave systems nearby. Wisconsin, Cave of the Mounds. Cave of the Mounds was discovered entirely by accident in 1939 when limestone quarry workers blasted through rock and exposed a hidden opening. Work at the quarry stopped immediately once the extent of the formations inside became clear. Designated a National Natural Landmark in 1987, it's still considered one of the most significant caves in the entire upper Midwest for the density and variety of its mineral formations. Wyoming Great Expectations Cave. Great Expectations Cave, high in the Bighorn Mountains, drops more than 1,400 feet, making it one of the deepest limestone caves in the country and the second deepest in Wyoming. Its lower exit sits near a passage nicknamed the Grim Crawl of Death, a brutally tight squeeze that has to be navigated to get back out. Inside is the Great Hall, Wyoming's largest known cave room, stretching over 2,000 feet long. 50 states, 50 caves, and the pattern that keeps repeating is how much of this was sitting there completely unknown until somebody happened to notice steam rising from snow, or a fisherman spotted trout swimming into solid rock, or two teenagers went hiking and found a hole nobody had ever mapped. So here's the real question for the comments. If you had to explore just one of these, the bottomless pool in North Carolina, the mile-and-a-half fissure in Utah, or the lava tube with a boulder wedged in the ceiling in Washington, which one would you actually go down into? Let me know below, subscribe if you want the next deep dive, and I'll see you underground.